Greetings, everyone, and I'm welcoming you to another Foundational Friday experience through the Enlightenment and Transformation channel. I'm your host, Uya Asan Anu, and firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for taking out the time, or your rationing of time, and space and energy to be here with us all during this session. In this episode, we'll be covering the concept of the Egun, otherwise known as the ancestors or ancestral spirits. This has been a highly requested show for maybe about a year now. I've been getting requests pretty steady for this one. So, of course, it's been highly anticipated. It's important for everyone to understand this, and that's that I'm bringing you all through a process. Those of you who are registered students of the Anu spiritual training, you are going through several processes at once, especially for those of you who we have more interaction and, you've submitted some of your progress and some of your works to me, then, it's been individualized for you all. But those of you who listen to the show, I know many times when we begin to study or we're introduced to a tradition, because not everyone who listens to this show is Yoruba, and this is not a Yoruba broadcast, though much of what I do does pivot around the Yoruba pantheon or the Orisha pantheon and its philosophies and calculations. But it's important to understand that there's a process. Even in our ancient mystery schools, there was a process of initiation. A student couldn't go to the door and say, I want to learn this. And immediately teachers and grand masters would be led to accommodate them just based on what they think or feel that they should know in the moment. So a lot of times I know I get requests for different shows, and those requests are not ignored, but there's a process and there's a path that I'm bringing all of the listeners through, and it's a critical path. All right. And I'm going to address just a small piece of just collective housekeeping for the learning community that we all need to stay mindful of. And one of the things that will really block your paths of learning or make you feel like you're in a place where you're just not growing and you're stagnating is the constant propulsion towards discipleship and the constant propulsion towards self-entitlement. And what I mean by that is this. I get a lot of emails, sometimes even voicemails and all different kinds of outreach towards me from people who would like me to individualize my teaching for them. And of course, I'm not going to do that. Or from other people who would like to be my disciple. By now, if you've listened at least to about 5 or 6 shows at least, but certainly the earlier shows, by now you would have realized that I am staunchly against anyone giving up their power to anything, whether it be another person or whether it be another entity or whether it even be an idea. You were granted, and there was power, Ashe, deposited in you for a reason, not to hand off to someone else. Okay, so I don't look for disciples in my work, and I certainly am less inclined to give my sacred jewels to those who feel entitled to them. Okay, so especially those of you who are not students, I have to be honest with you here. If you haven't taken out the energy or the time to sign up for classes, then it's really arrogant of you to assume that you can have an unreasonable amount of my time and tutelage. Okay? So I'm not saying this from a place of frustration, because the reality is, most of my communications with you all is very insulated. And what I mean by that is that, no one has my personal, information in terms of my phone number and things like that. So if it's as easy as a voicemail or email, I can just delete that. But it goes deeper than that. I'm sharing this to you for your own posterity, for your own growth, for you to understand something about what it is to grow in whatever tradition you're in, or for you to grow spiritually. No one's obligated to give you anything, and you shouldn't feel entitled, nor should you give someone a title and try to force them into a position. For example, I tell all of my students, do not call me Baba. Okay? You don't need to do that. Those in my family can call me that, but I'm not your father. Okay? If I adopt you as such, then you can do that. You can call me Haru. You can even call me Yuya, but Haru is most appropriate. Okay? Now, for those, I've said that many times, many have ignored it. So for those who choose to anyway, a lot of times what you're doing is you're trying to create a space for me to go reside in. So now I'll feel a sense of obligation over you because I'm your Baba. That's not going to happen. Okay? I'm giving you the information. I'm giving you the guidance. Every Friday, you even get a free half hour to 45 minutes of concentrated information. The classes are very affordable. My readings are even more affordable. And I'm aware of that. I don't live in a cave somewhere. I don't live under a rock. And I don't wander the earth by foot. I live in a home just like you do. And I have expenses and things that I have to take care of just like you. So I'm very much aware of the value of my time, and I'm very much aware of the value of my information. I want you to understand that. So if I give to you, it's out of grace, not compulsion. Okay? But don't look for it. A lot of you are stagnating yourselves, and I'm seeing it. And this goes not just from my students, those who are not students. My students kind of have a different kind of understanding of me. They know how I teach. But for you other ones, you're so used to people coming with information and either coming from an angle and so you feel you have to get your angle in right away. Or if they're not coming from an angle, all they desire to be is this great community recognized teacher. That's not me at all. I do what I do, and I enjoy what I do, whether I'm recognized for it or not. Okay? So I just want to share that with you, for those of you who have been lazy and not willing to do the work yourselves. I'm not answering base level questions. I'm not doing spirituality 101 with you. If you want that, sign up for the classes, buy my books, go to the Sadulu House page, ask other students questions. If I spend my time, even if it's 10 to 15 minutes, breaking something down to you that I've already explained in a free broadcast or in my book or in my classes, then that takes away from the scholarship and the study that I need to do in order to bring you more information. So you'll end up stagnating me. I'm not going to let that happen. All right. So don't do it to yourself either. All right. I'm very much interested in seeing people grow and seeing people blossom and flourish. But I'm not obligated to your growth. You are. Be accountable for yourself. Okay. So this ties in to our conversation today about the Egun. Okay. About the ancestors. A lot of you sometimes want me to speak about things about ancestors and Orisha because you want to see and understand what your obligation is to them. So in the same instance, what is your obligation to your ancestors? Okay. Have I set up my shrine properly? Am I saying these prayers correctly? Am I actually getting through? Are they in a comfortable place? Are they in a safe place? These are all the questions that come up during counseling sessions that I have with people. And sometimes in readings, these are the questions that people ask. And this is what's important for you to understand. You came to the planet because you have a mission. In this is where ego shows its value, because it allows you to separate from the ideology of serving the masses to the point that you negate yourself completely. As a soul being, when you came to the planet, you already negated yourself by squeezing all of your humongous consciousness inside of a human vessel that didn't really have all of the wherewithal to even understand you. So imagine that. You're stuck inside of this body that can't even understand you. You're stuck inside of a body that cannot understand you at the soul level. So how do you come to a better place of understanding of yourself at the soul level? Well, within your blood, within your veins, within the rivers of life, Oshun's domain, inside of you, we have ancestral energies, or what we call demons, or damians, meaning hidden substance, or the dark substance. Okay, we covered this a little bit when we covered the jinn. Okay, so they're able to remind you and elucidate some of your past life information. Okay, as we know, we are all ancestors come back to return to balance out our soul's karma. So we come back to balance out our soul's karma. That is our individual mission. Now, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your great-aunt, and whomever has their own mission. And one of the things you have to be careful of is not to fulfill their mission, but to fulfill your own. This is when people say, I hear voices in my head, and we call them demons. And your job is to be the loudest voice, or at least the most influential voice within your body temple. That is your Ori. Okay, your Ori has to be the most influential voice, because your ancestors are always and constantly trying to get you to do this, get you to do that. I've given this example before. When I got much heavier into my West African studies, I remember sitting at my ancestral Jingili one night, and I told my grandmother that I would serve her in the highest way that I knew that I could. And I asked her what she wanted, and she said, I want you to be a preacher. And I laughed and I said, well, Grandma, I'm not going to do that. That's not going to happen. But I will give you the highest level of what it is that I currently know, even beyond preaching. See, when she transitioned, that was a humongous and great honor, for me to have been a preacher. So this leads me into this other, I'm going to call it mistake that a lot of people make. And this really, it goes along the lines of opinion, but I feel very, very strong. I have a strong opinion about this one. A lot of times when people set up their ancestral shrines, what they do is they put implements on that shrine that their ancestors were highly invested in when they walked the earth. So you'll find Bibles, you'll find Qurans, you'll find Torahs, you'll find Christian crosses, so forth and so on. Even some of the meals, you'll find pig's feet, and whatever else that they ate when they were here. And one of the things that you have to use your own reasoning for is this. Ask yourself if some of those same things that you're putting there are the reason why they're now ancestors. Okay? If you had relatives die from diabetes, and you put a bunch of candied yams and, cornbread and things like that, rice on the shrine, to me that would be offensive. And I would say the same thing for these orthodox religions. Some of these religions are the cause for our ancestors' demise. So your job as one who's continuing the work of your Egun or of your ancestors is to give them the next level. Why would they want to be stagnated at the ancestral realm that they're at? You know, and there's nothing against ancestors, but if you leave this planet and you find yourself in the ancestral realm, that means you didn't get back home, because the ancestral realm is not home. So what you can do is give strength and energy to your ancestors to get them to the next step. So that way, maybe they don't even have to incarnate back on the earth. Maybe they can go straight from the ancestral realm to back home. Because how do we know that we can do this? Well, let's look at the word Egun. Okay, let's look at the word Egun, which is E-G-U-N. This is a Yoruba word that we use for ancestors. Now, you have two words. You have Egun and Egungun. Many people confuse Egungun. They think that Egungun means Egun, but just in plural. This is untrue. Or they say that Egungun are the ancestors that exist outside of your bloodline. Also untrue. The Egungun is a society. Okay, that's why when you hear about the Egungun society, it's never mentioned as the Egun society. Okay, the Egungun is a group. Their society. All right. The Egun, the word Egun means bone. The word Egun means bone. Okay. Why is this significant? Not just because when we, think about Baron Samedi in our Voodoo culture, we see the skull and crossbones. It's significant because your blood is made inside of your bones. Blood is created and concocted within your bones. Okay, so now, if blood is made and concocted within our bones, then now we understand the significance of not only Ogun's place, but we also understand the significance of Obatala's place, and we understand the significance of offering blood, or ashe, in the form of blood, or the melanin that exists within the blood. More key, put a star next to that. When we're giving offerings and service to the energies that we work with, because like the Christians say, there's power in the blood. Well, power we know to also be ashe. So let's say there's ashe in the blood, right? But we knew that already, right? That was no secret for most of you listening. But the key is here, you also have life in the blood. Well, which life? Your life? Whose life? All of the lives are in the blood. All of the lives are in the blood. All of the ancestral lifetimes are in the blood. Okay. So how do we begin to pull from these ancestral lifetimes, or we even begin to speak to these ancestral lifetimes? I'll tell you one easy ritual that you can always do to connect to your ancestors. And our indigenous elders still do it and did it, those who are ancestors now on the continent of Akibulan, which we know to be Africa, right? They would always perform dances and activities that their ancestors did, because in doing this, they became them. So at certain times of year, they would perform certain harvest dances, right? And this was a part of their tradition. So by repeating certain rituals and activities that are in alignment with your traditions, what you actually end up doing is you evoke the ancestors who performed those things before. So, for example, if my ascendants who come after me, let's say 100 years from now, say, we want to evoke Baba Haru, and we want to bring him forth, what could they do to bring me forth? Okay, well, they can play music, string instruments. This is my thing. They could play drums. They can do martial arts. They can do a radio show, right? They can do the things. They could do the things that I did that were sacred and ancient to me when I did them, and in that they become me, because I'm already one step right there anyway, because I'm in their blood. Why am I in their blood? Because I'm their Egun. Egun is bone. Bone is blood. Okay? So, This is very significant when we start looking at questions of, well, how do I establish my ancestral shrine? I'm going to start here when we speak about the logistics of an ancestral shrine, and I'm going to say grasping the root of divine power gives you a full layout on how you establish an ancestral shrine. But even phase 1 of our new spiritual training, it also goes into it. Okay, so between those two sources, you shouldn't have any more questions about how to establish an ancestral shrine. But what I am going to speak on is some of the dogma that comes along with establishing an ancestral shrine. Some tell you should have 9 candles, or you should have 7 candles. You should have 9 glasses of water, 7 glasses of water, 9 glasses of rum, 9 glasses of water. Again, a lot of this comes from Catholicism, especially when you're dealing with the rules. Okay, now I'm not knocking anyone's tradition. I'm really not, because I know the traditions that these come from, and some of these same things when I first started, I was taught as well. But ultimately, we have to recognize that we evolve. When we evolve, our Egun evolve. Don't keep them in the same place. That's a tragedy. Don't keep them in the same place. Well, when my Egun were here, they were this. So I have to put a Quran on the table. I have to put a Bible on the table. I have to put a plate of hog maws and McDonald's burgers on the table, because these are the things that they enjoy. Well, you'll hear less from your Egun when you do things like that. Why? Because your Egun really want to get to the next step, and they're going to go to the vessel that is moving. They're going to go to the maverick of the family that's moving and pushing beyond the herd and saying, no, we can evolve, we can be better, we can be more. So that's why some of you will say, well, I'm the only one in my family who's like this, and everyone thinks I'm weird, and so forth and so on, because the rest of your family is still repeating the lower base order activities that may have turned those people into ancestors before their time, or may not get them to the next level. Because remember, there's various levels of the astral plane, so therefore there's various levels of the ancestral realm. You have some of your ancestors who were still sitting inside of synagogues and churches waiting for Jesus to come back. Okay, you have other ancestors who are still standing on corners, okay, waiting to hit the number. They're still stuck in that mentality. One of the things that you can use to understand this is watch the zombie movies. Now, we know in the past couple of years we've had a humongous influx of zombie movies, at least in American pop culture. I can't speak for the rest of the world. And one of the key things you'll recognize that the points that they're making in these films is that even after life in the zombie world, people are still doing the same exact things that they did when they were quote unquote alive, if you want to call that life. So most of the zombie films you'll see, they always end up at a mall. Almost every time the last showdown takes place in the mall, and they're running through the mall and so forth and so on, and the zombies are trying to eat them because they're alive and they have blood, they have life, they still have potential to evolve and expand. Now, you give this up when you repeat the same activities. I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to people and I've said, well, why do you do this? Or what is the meaning behind this? And they say, well, this is what we've always done. This is how I was raised. Well, in this country, many of us were raised wrong. Our parents gave us the best that they knew, and they gave us better than what their parents knew, and so forth and so on down the line. But we have to continue to make leaps and bounds each generation. One thing that my father would always impress upon me when I was younger is that he would always say each generation should do better than the last. So he expected me to do better than he did. That was a charge that I took very seriously, and I'm glad that that is something that was said to me. You don't have to necessarily repeat what I did, or even walk in my footsteps, but stand upon my shoulders. We say this all the time, the ancestors are the shoulders that we stand on. Well, if we're standing on their shoulders, and clearly we're reaching for somewhere that they didn't arrive at. Okay, so your job is to continue the mission of arriving there. The best way to communicate with your ancestors is by continuing the mission that they were on. Okay, you had some ancestors who said, you know what, I want to get healthier, so I'm going to stop drinking regular soda, I'm going to drink diet soda. Okay, well, now we know that that's also cancerous. So we can take that to the next step. And we can say, you know what, I'm not going to drink soda at all. I'm going to drink fruit juice. And then you'll learn and say, okay, well, the fruit juice is pasteurized, which makes it cancerous. So I'm not going to drink pasteurized juices. Then we might say, okay, well, certain juices I shouldn't be drinking at all because they're too acidic, and that acid causes cancer again. So you keep going and you keep going and keep going till you refine and you refine and you refine and you refine. This is what the soul desires to do. So before you begin to study how do I build this and how do I do this ritual or that ritual for the Egun, the first thing you need to study is the dysfunction as well as the function of your Egun in your own personal lineage, because that now represents the function and the dysfunction that's not only in your personality but what's in your blood as well, and the things that you have now come to rebalance. Keep in mind that when a soul comes, it comes with a mission of balancing itself out. So it will give you a certain personality that will lend itself to balancing out its own dysfunction, or more so its own damage. Now, some of that damage that has been incurred was incurred by your ancestral energies. As much as we want to glorify and we want to uplift the name of the ancestors, they weren't all conscious and they weren't all righteous. So, but they came still with a mission nonetheless. And your whole journey here is about forming the picture, rounding out the picture, balancing out the picture. Okay, so your personality that you were given to now is not to be suppressed for the will of your ancestors. The personality that you have now is supposed to be glorified and enhanced and augmented through the Ashe blood of your ancestors or of your Egun. Because this personality that you came with, this identity that you came with, whoever and whatever you are in this time, is the tool for you to balance out your ancestral energies. That's your first ritual above any and all things else. Your first ritual is to explore your own personality and to explore who and what your ancestral line has been. Have you been blacksmiths? Have you been clothing designers? Have you been preachers? Have you been shamans? Have you been healers? So forth and so on. Have you been murderers? Have you been rapists? Have you been robbers? Have you been thieves? And if so, what is being balanced out here with each incarnation? Okay, that's so important. Before, again, you begin to go and say, okay, well, I want to do this ritual, I want to do that ritual. Stop always looking to go outside of yourself. Go within your own blood, because in that you're going within your own Egun. They're the quickest and easiest force to tap into, because they're always speaking constantly. All you have to do is just be quiet for a little while. You'll start hearing your blood speak to you. You'll hear the voices. And sometimes you'll think you're crazy. And a lot of times you hear them right before you go into sleep. You'll hear conversations even. You hear them talking to each other. Now it's your opportunity as the last step in their evolution to listen to those conversations, draw up the best parts, and then formulate a plan of action that will bring everyone forward to where they need to be. That is your charge, to carry them to where they need to be, not to go back and repeat their mistakes. And in truth, not to go back and even repeat their glory. The only reason you go back and repeat anything is for a ritual. That's it. So from a ritualistic standpoint, you'll go back and repeat their ancient and primal activities in order to understand them better, and in order to evoke them in your life and evoke the highest parts. So repeat the highest parts of what they did. The lower parts should be drained away. They should be filtered out. That's why you came to the planet again, to filter out the old stuff, not to repeat it. Okay, so we'll probably do a part 2 of the Egun, because I know a lot of you wanted me to speak about different rituals and, give you a step-by-step. The book, the classes give you step-by-steps. But aside from that, there's a preparing that you have to do before you even do the step-by-steps. And that's to discover and find the mission first. So with that said, I am Haru Ya Asan Anu. For those interested in classes, head over to saduluhouse.com. That's SADULUHOUSE.com, and you'll find a link there for spiritual training, and you can sign up for classes. Make sure you pick up a copy of Grasping the Root of Divine Power. And for those with even more questions, head over to the Facebook page, click like, and join the community. All right. Peace. Against anyone giving up their power to anything, whether it be another person or whether it be another entity or whether it even be an idea. You were granted, and there was power Ashe deposited in you for a reason, not to hand off to someone else. Okay, so I don't look for disciples in my work, and I certainly am less inclined to give my sacred jewels to those who feel entitled to them. Okay, so especially those of you who are not students, I have to be honest with you here. You know, if you haven't taken out the energy or the time to sign up for classes, then it's really arrogant of you to assume that you can have rules. There was a process of initiation. A student couldn't go to the door and say, I want to learn this, and immediately teachers and grand masters would be led to accommodate them just based on what they think or feel that they should know in the moment. So a lot of times I know I get requests for different shows, and those requests are not ignored, but there's a process and there's a path that I'm bringing all of the listeners through, and it's a critical path. All right. And I'm going to address just a small piece of just collective housekeeping for the learning community that we all need to stay mindful of. And one of the things that will really block your paths of learning or greetings, everyone. And I'm welcoming you to another Foundational Friday experience through the Enlightenment and Transformation channel. I'm your host, Yuya Asan Anu. And firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for taking out the time, or your rationing of time and space and energy to be here with us all during this session. In this episode, we'll be covering the concept of the Egun, otherwise known as the ancestors or ancestral spirits. This has been a highly requested show for maybe about a year now. I've been getting requests pretty steady for this one. So, of course, it's been highly anticipated. It's important for everyone to understand this, and that's that I'm bringing you all through a process. Those of you who are registered students of the Anu spiritual training, you are going through several processes at once, especially for those of you who we have more interaction and, you've submitted some of your progress and some of your works to me, then, it's been individualized for you all. But those of you who listen to the show, I know many times when we begin to study or we're introduced to a tradition, because not everyone who listens to this show is Yoruba, and this is not a Yoruba broadcast, though much of what I do does pivot around the Yoruba pantheon or the Orisha pantheon and its philosophies and calculations. But it's important to understand that there's a process. Even in our ancient mystery school, make you feel like you're in a place where you're just not growing and you're stagnating, is the constant propulsion towards discipleship and the constant propulsion towards self-entitlement. And what I mean by that is this. I get a lot of emails, sometimes even voicemails and all different kinds of outreach towards me from people who would like me to individualize my teaching for them. And of course, I'm not going to do that. Or from other people who would like to be my disciple. By now, if you've listened I'd say at least to about 5 or 6 shows at least, but certainly the earlier shows, by now you would have realized that I am staunchly